You're listening to Best Practices with Kenny Berger. On this podcast, we talk with the country's top trial lawyers about their approaches to every aspect of practice, from case selection to closing argument. Welcome. Our guests today are trial attorneys Joe Freed and Chris Finney. I think this is the first time that we've had two lawyers on a single podcast with us from different firms, but it is a wonderful idea that Chris brought forth after a recent verdict where he kindly and honestly and generously gave some credit to some things that he'd picked up on and learned from Joe. And without any further ado, Chris, tell us a little bit about your practice. And you've obviously been on the podcast before, but a little bit about your practice and a little bit about your recent victory.
Thanks, Kenny. So the practice is located here in St. Louis. We're like a 10-person firm trying to do more cases, trying to learn from more people. And in this case, was probably a 24-hour trial that we tried in St. Louis County, starting on a Wednesday afternoon around 3:30. We finished with the verdict Thursday at 3:30. The details, I guess, it was a 81-year-old who was struck when an individual ran through a blinking red light. I thought pretty significant injuries. The carrier, I don't know if they did or did not. I guess they do now. But original offer was $170,000. They came out of the policy the week before trial to $315,000, and then the verdict was $4 million. So that's the long and short of it. Just a great client.
Chris, when you say they came out of the policy, tell us more about that.
So the policy was $250 or is $250. I don't know if they moved it, but they made 3 offers below the policy. And one of these things, and this is interesting, I guess right now, is that if you listen to like what Joe says and what a lot of other people do say who are trying to practice with integrity, there's no tricks, right? And so when this adjuster called me I thought this was an open and shut $250,000 policy limit case. And when she called me, she said she had $170,000 for her first offer. And I said, ma'am, respectfully, you're at 170, you're going to be into 200. You're going to be close to the policy limit. You're kind of flirting with it. Why don't you just go back, ask your boss, tell him, hey, we'll take the 250. You're getting really close to it. And she kind of knew that was coming. And so she called me back and had like 177. I said, listen, I really want to be honest with you on this. I'm not trying to trick you. This is not a bad faith setup. This case is worth more than $250. Your insured made a mistake. One more time, would you please go back? I can't take less than $250 for the injuries. She called me back and she had like 191. And I said, at that point, we're just going to file suit and move forward. And so when the lawyer got the case, great guy. He called and tried to offer the $250 after he did some discovery and stuff like that. And I just said we were too far down the road to turn back now. So.
And even when it came to the offers above $250, the highest pretrial offer again was?
Well, the highest post or pre-verdict offer was $315 the week before trial.
And did they try to offer additional money during trial?
No.
All right, so let's talk about the trial itself and some of the things that you picked up on from a recent podcast that Joe Freed did with the fabulous trial consultant, Harry Plotkin.
So I think I've talked to you before about this, Kenny. What I'd like to do before the trials is listen to people like Joe, like Michael Leeserman, whoever's on Michael Cowan's podcast. A lot of those things, I've saved them all. You can save them in your podcast app and you can re-listen to them. And the ones that I listened to with Joe, they always resonate with me. And I think I've told you this before, Joe. And a lot of it is the speed trial stuff. And a lot of it is, though, coming from a place of honesty, credibility, and integrity. And this most recent one, I was listening and he was talking a lot about the valuable things in people's lives. The family, the health, the freedom, all of those types of things. And the juror's oath, another big thing that really stuck out to me. And they started to resonate with me. And so I thought, in this case, especially where I had what most people would say an elderly client, I wanted to make sure they adhered to the instructions, and what was taken from this man was a very big deal, and that the jurors understood it. I mean, this is a non-economic case, right? There was no medical bills or any lost wages. And so as I listened to Joe, he talked about these things of, how important these are to all of us and that they're universal across the country, right, Joe? I mean, you've said this before, that you can go pretty much anywhere and you will be able to determine that somebody's going to say, most people are going to say family, faith, freedom, their pickup truck, whatever it is, their elements of freedom is almost universal across the country. And so I wanted to tap into that. And so in this case, we had this was a benefit to me, very limited jury selection time. And so Joe had said, and you can chime in, Joe, when you feel like, is that almost you use it as an excuse to say, I have limited time. And I want to talk about the things that are most important to you guys in this case. And this is a case about what's valuable to you. We actually didn't have very much time. Monsanto jury selection was starting with these cases over glyphosate and all those things. They had 150 jurors. They took all the jurors. We sat around all day. Yeah. The judge wouldn't even give us, we begged for 30. We finally got 30 jurors to choose from. At it was like 3:30 they came in on Wednesday. And I actually got up and could honestly say, folks, I don't have much time to talk to you. And so I'm not going to ask you things about, are you related to law enforcement or your prior laws? Like, I will make this deal. If you talk to me, I'll skip all that stuff.
Right.
So, yep. And what I want to talk to you about is what's important in your life.
Yep.
And Joe, what the one lady said, I have to tell you this, she raised her hand, she said her family, stuff like that. And we we're talking, and within 3 minutes, she said her family. I said, why? She said, well, I love my family. And I said, oh, do we all love our families? Everybody raised their hand and said, why do you love your family? And she couldn't even speak. She started crying.
Right.
This was in the first 5 minutes. And what you have said, Joe, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about this, is that the shocking vulnerability, and also if you can get to something real and authentic quickly in any group, you've elevated that experience to one of almost awe. I mean, is that what you were trying to do when you do those things? Is that the idea?
Okay. You're Chris, you're saying so many things that can be taken apart in terms of discussion, but yeah, what you're, one of the main things is the universality of, like we the human animal, we like to distinguish ourselves from all the other people, right? I mean, and we look for all these ways to make ourselves different. And I mean, look at race, look at sex, look at gender orientation, look at, my common ancestry. I mean, all the things that we as human beings look to separate ourselves. It's always interesting to me because I'm an SEC football fan. Okay. You go, you have people rioting in the streets about, whatever the heck the issue is of the moment. But on football Saturday, if you're wearing the right color jersey, I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your national origin. I don't care any of those things. You're my brother and my sister, and we're here and we're joined together to fight against this common enemy, the University of South Carolina. No, I'm just joking. But so it's interesting that we are a tribal animal, and so what if we could think about a jury as coming together around, forget all the differences. I mean, can we get to something that's universal? Can we get to something that pulls everybody together? And so through a number of things that happened in my life, I started to realize there are things that are universal. There are, and most recently, I hearkened back to the Maslow's hierarchy. Do you remember that? Like, if you took a psychology class, there was this triangle, and at the base of the triangle were all these things like, the things that are the basic needs of human beings, the shelter and things like that. And then you moved up and there's things like love. And then at the top is like self-actualization and all these other things. But there wasn't a Maslow's hierarchy for white people and a different one for Black people. There wasn't a Maslow's hierarchy for people who are gay or people who are trans or people who are whatever, however they identify as. And it's a reminder that there is a core at which we all have. I mean, and you mentioned some of them earlier. Like if you say to people, no matter where you are and no matter what their differentiators are, if you say, what are the things that are most valuable in your life? I mean, we could go anywhere in the country, and I believe this to be true, and somebody may prove me wrong one day, but so far, I mean, I've been all over the country. I've handled cases in 43 states. And I believe that if we ask people in any place you go, even outside the United States, you say, what are the things that are most important to you? They're going to say things like family. And they may have a different idea of what that means. It could be the family they were born into, or it could be the family they chose, if you know what I mean. I mean, we like create, we're born in our family. We love most of those people, but there's a few who challenge our, whatever. But then there's also the people who are our closest people, our people. That's what I'm calling our family. And so those relationships are just tremendously important. I mean, they're among the most important and valuable things to us. Freedom, the ability to live life on our own terms, the ability. So
yeah, you had said terms like agency, self-determination, which I was. Then those are universal in everybody, and they are in all of our clients. If you sit down, and they, like you've said, they look different in everybody, but they're there.
Right. That's the thing that's interesting is we might say family and different people conjure up a different idea of that. We might say freedom and it might mean something very different to me and to somebody else. We might say agency, what you said, like the ability to choose what we do and how we spend our time. The ability to, I mean, the idea of not being a burden on people who we love or who love us. Those kind of things.
That was a big one that came up too, because as you talked in some of your podcasts, it was, now what's the worst thing, right? We cover the things we really care about, and then what's the worst. And that, I wanted to tell you, it was some of the most powerful conversation came out of that. That's when people started to yell out. They'd say, somebody said, Bert, I had to feed it to him a little bit but it comes naturally. If you say, hey, what about being a burden on someone? And then people be like, oh, kill me.
Yeah, that's right.
And
take me out. And that's how I am.
Yeah, same here. And the number of people, which I forgot, because you only think in your own little world, that had been taking care of or were taking care of elderly family members or friends actively during this selection process, right? This was their day-to-day life, was taking care of someone. They brought those stories forward, and it was very, very palpable that they didn't want to have anything like that in their life.
So here's the sort of magic of this. If you accept what we're talking about as being true, that there are these universal things, then if your case is about that thing, and you can frame it so that what the other side is saying is that's not valuable, and what we're saying is it is valuable. You've heard me call that the two worlds closing. The world's going to be one of two ways at the end of this, right?
The binary choice.
Right, it's binary choice. They say this concept of freedom that we're talking about is not really all that valuable. And we say, are you kidding me? I mean, how can that be true? Now, I know I don't get to decide, but if I don't come here and present this case, then they get to decide this. And I wasn't going to let that happen. And that's why we needed you, because you do get to decide for this community whether that is as valuable as I say it is, or as little valuable as they say it is. And you're going to answer that by filling out the form, this verdict form. And so I think that when you get people talking about the things that are important to them, suddenly they perk up. They want to tell you about the things that are important to them. And then heaven help the person who's trying to say that's not valuable.
Yeah.
So then you end up with a situation, because what I'm waiting to get to in your case is, what is that? And my sense is that it's going to be about people who are older.
Yeah.
Um,
And that came up. And so, right, you look at the sticky points in your case, or the danger points, or the fear points, or the just can't get over stuff that Mark Mandel will talk about. And, but they can't be manufactured. So the real one in my case was, he was 81 at the time of the crash. And I had to very much explore, like you've said, did a part of me feel a certain way? And a part of me, I'm ashamed to admit, did feel that, listen, he's older, he recovered well, but, he's old. And, that's that. And so when I said that to the jury, I only wanted, because there was only one true that felt in my core that I felt that part of shame about his age. I did say to the jurors, I said, listen, I want to bring up something that's important, that I don't know if you're going to feel this, or if I wonder if anybody else feels this way. When Don came to my office, I couldn't help but notice that, he's 81 and he's lived a good life. And maybe his case, his injuries, what's happened to him is not as valuable as if it had happened to someone who was younger. And I'm wondering if anybody feels just a part of that too. And nobody said they did, right? But I know it's a universal feeling. I just know.
well, can I say something about
Yeah.
that, Chris, real quickly? I mean, one of the things that strikes me when you say that is, we, the lawyers, have the curse of knowledge.
Mhm.
We have been indoctrinated, you and I and Kenny and all of us who do this for a living, we've been indoctrinated into the practice. Somebody told us that matters.
Yeah.
Somebody taught us that that's what a distinguishing point should be. We've heard that argued, and we've accepted that as a partially true. The people who don't have that curse of knowledge are the people on a jury. And sometimes the longer I do this, the more I see how we become our own limiters because we've accepted something to be true. And in this case, when you ask those jurors the question, there is the part of me that wonders, are they just don't want to be that person who admits that they feel that way? But you make it okay. Like the way you did it was the perfect way to do it for lawyers, for teaching moment, is you own it yourself. That's how you do this for Dyer. But you say, I feel this way, and there's a part of me that's embarrassed that I feel this way, but it's how I feel. And I'm wondering if I'm alone in that feeling, right? By you owning it, you're doing a couple things. First of all, you're being a human being. You're showing them a vulnerability, a willingness to talk about something that is difficult for a lawyer. Like most people are going, I can't believe that guy's saying that. But you get a lot from the credibility that comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you own it yourself, and that makes it okay for other people to talk about it. Right.
Well, and
Chris, something that's interesting, because I've been kind of listening and trying to put myself in the shoes of one of your potential jurors, right? Like I don't really know anything about this case other than you got a great verdict. And when you mentioned that the 81-year-old piece, because I've been listening kind of from the perspective of a would-be juror, as someone without a whole lot of, like I've got no lawyer connection to the case. So the 81, again, my frame of reference to Joe's point was not, as the representative of this person, but as like my dad's 81.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would it be worth less if something happened to him? I don't know. It'd still be worth a lot.
Well, that's where they went. And then again, it was that palpable response where people I didn't have to call on them. Somebody lady goes, some lady got so upset in a good way where she said, no, my mom's 83 and she's just as alive as everybody else. And I said, does anybody else feel the same way? And they all felt the same way. But this is where I've learned from Joe. I wanted to make sure I closed this loop. And I said, well, do you think any less of me because I felt this way? Because I had a belief, I feel like parts of them do feel that just a little bit, right? And maybe that's my limiting belief of myself. But they immediately came to my rescue. and said, no, no, not at all, not at all. And in Missouri, we have an instruction that actually says you should not use age as a bias. And that we were able to tie that into the instruction, which is like, hey, us lawyers are such idiots. We need I didn't say this to him, but we need our own reminder in the jury instruction that says age is not a bias. And so, which Joe has discussed when you take that juror's oath, is someone going to try to get you to violate that oath? And oh, by the way, part of this oath is you cannot consider age. And now my defense lawyer is a very sharp, nice man. Once we kind of cut him off of the knees with that, it never came up again. He had told me before, as an 81, 83-year-old plaintiff, stuff like that. He did not mention his age one time. Because we kind of took the air out of the room. I felt like it was an authentic way. It's a very, very cool experience to kind of say, hey, I felt this way. Anybody feel the same? No, we don't feel the same. And we don't think any less of you because that's a human response to see that. And by the way, the law tells you can't consider it, and your oath is more powerful than anything.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it can play out lots of different ways, right? I mean, but what's happening, I think, with jurors is I mean, the end of the part about oath that you're talking about is what happens when you bring up the oath and you get people committed to what their oath is and that they're not going to violate it, then think about what at the end they now have to fill out a verdict form. They have to fill that thing out. And what they don't want to do is they don't want to be viewed as they have somehow been suckered into violating their oath. So what's the only way that you can prove, if you're a juror, that you did not allow something improper to enter, in this case, age? You got to award a big number. Because if you don't award a big number, then how have you proven that you haven't not awarded a big number because of age? So if you normalize the idea and you say, like in this case, if you normalize the idea and say, if you don't let age interfere, then this is a $4 million case. So now, and then you hand it off to them, right? Now, what's the only way they can prove? You get where I'm going. So the idea of oath is to bring people back to, it's a great way to talk about the things that are human for us to think about, that's normal and natural for us to think about, but you can't allow it to interfere with your verdict. And if we don't give voice to it, then there's the risk that you're going to wake up, ladies and gentlemen, somebody's going to wake up a week down the road from now. They're going to wake up, poke their eyes open and say, oh my gosh, I think I violated my oath. I didn't mean to, but I let this seep in. And so the argument in the closing argument about the oath is that piece. We don't want you, nobody wants to violate their oath. And it's a subtle thing, but we have to make sure that it's not going to seep in.
Well, and Joe, that was the other thing which leads, because you had mentioned this, and I found it to be really powerful with the group formation, the teamwork of the jurors, where you said, I asked the jurors for permission to say, if anybody feels like they are going, that they see one of their brothers and sisters on the jury talking about something that's outside the oath, are you all comfortable enough to say, hey, I think I get what you're saying. It's a human response, but I think we've gone outside what we're supposed to do. Are you all comfortable enough to pull them back in? Yes. And on the flip side, if you're on this jury and you start talking about something that one of your friends thinks is outside the oath, are you okay with them gently but firmly and appropriately saying, Kenny, I think you're getting outside that oath. We need you to come back here. And after the trial, when all the jurors came up and I spoke to them and they wanted to talk, and the foreperson could not have been more excited. She was the foreperson. And she said to me, there were several times we had to remind people that, hey, that's outside your oath. I want you to be part of the team.
I love that that got shared. It's such great validation. And you even, yeah, I mean, those are the words. That's the way that I do it. I take it on myself. I always say, hey, if I were on the jury, you know, I'm not the strongest guy always. And I've got in some ways, and in other ways, I am too strong in other ways. So if I start running off and I'm not, I've forgotten this piece, I might need somebody to come alongside me and gently but firmly say, hey man, you don't want to wake up down the line thinking you're violating your, you know, realizing you're violating your oath. I think you're getting close to that line. I'm coming from a place of love and appreciation and respect for you. I'm not coming and yelling at you for doing it because that's human. But I would want that to happen, even though it might feel like a rebuke in the moment.
Mhm.
It's a much better for me than waking up 2 weeks from now and realizing I violated my oath and now I can't do anything about it.
What I thought was really powerful, that's the one thing that's very powerful. The other thing is it helps form, you know, it helps give them a boundary of that group, that they're all on the same team working together, and that, hey, it's okay to have these open conversations. It's okay. You guys are going to share an experience that's very important and very awesome to say, hey, you are on my team. We are on this together. And if you're my teammate and I think you're doing something wrong, I'm going to hold you accountable in a loving, firm, confident, but very tender way of said, hey, I think you're outside that box. Will you come back here with us? And does everybody else agree?
Well, guys, and one of the things that I love about this, kind of hearing y'all discuss it, is it gives people absolute permission to be themselves and to be human beings and to exist as who they are. Uh, the day before the trial began, the moment the trial is over, but within this sacred arena, you know, these are the rules that are being played by. This is the oath. And
Kenny, that is the magic. The magic of this is we can be wildly different. We can be on the opposite ends of any spectrum you want to put us on: political, socioeconomic, race, gender identity, all the things that we use to separate ourselves. We can stay exactly where we are. Nobody has to move nobody has to compromise who they are or where they come from. But there is a place from which we can gather that is, I'm going to call it beneath that is universally human. I mean, if we talk about that idea of not being a burden on people, it doesn't matter what any of those differentiators are. So the first message to lawyers is, shouldn't we be making our case about those things that are universal, right? Like if we know, I mean, you can't, I mean, yes, there's blue states and there's red states and there's purple states and there's pink states and there's all the kind of states, you know, whatever the distinguishers. But do you want your case to depend upon what the ideology is of the non-homogeneous group of people who get pulled together to make a decision in your case, namely the jurors? So what if we have to universalize? If we're going to get the best results universally, we have to universalize. We have to appeal to that which is universal, regardless of what the color of somebody's skin is or their socioeconomics or any of the other differentiators. That's what I think that's what I've learned, is that if I can make my case about something that is universal, and then I can say, this case is about this at the end, and why we're here. The reason we're here is because they don't appreciate this, and we do. And your verdict, we're asking for a verdict that appreciates this. We're asking for a verdict that says that family is super important, and then if you screw up my family, my relationships, man, that's got to be valuable. I mean, because the only metric we got's money, you know. So if you affect my freedom, if you affect my individuality, if you affect then you got to pay dearly for that, because those are the things that really are at the core of our humanity. And if you can tap those things, and then jury selection becomes fun, because you start tapping them. And Chris obviously did a great job doing this in this case. We got people talking about the things that are universally important to them. Chris, was it fun to talk about those things?
So it was a blast. We wrote down the list, right? I wrote down a list. I said, all right, let's put this on the list. And I had a jury selection last week. The case got mistried, unfortunately, but I got to pick the whole jury. We'll be back in the next week. We did it again with that jury pool, and it is much more. I don't want to say
Engaging.
yeah, engaging. I want not the word inclusive, because everybody starts to get into this topic, and they
It's
start to
engaging.
talk.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is, depends on your defense lawyer. You'll get a defense lawyer. This in the first case, he was great. He just wasn't his style to be obstructive. The second one, he was out of his seat constantly. He didn't know really what was going on. Speaking objections, everything. The judge told me, if you get up one more time, I'm just going to rule from the bench. I don't want to have any more sidebars, because you can feel something happening in the room. I mean, you can
Of course
feel,
you can.
yeah,
And it's magic. What you're feeling is the formation of the group
yes,
around the thing that you are making the case about. That's what's magic. And it took me forever. It took me forever until literally just a few years ago is when this all kind of came together for me, my thoughts about how can we make it about. We talked, I mean, I've heard so many great, smart people for so long talk about, creating something that's universally true, like we're gonna focus on. And I honestly think that this is the reason beneath why something like Reptile even worked.
mm-hmm.
It's because Reptile appealed to safety, which is one of those universal truths. So now we can leave that behind, having learned what we can learn from it, and we can say, okay, so what else is universally true? And we can get to these things. So tell us a little bit about what you did with. So what did come out in the list? What were the most important ones that you ended up focusing on that came out from your voir dire list?
Then I got the list here. They said family, health, faith, work, character and integrity, and community.
All right. And so how did you then play that into your case?
So my client was a widower. His wife had died some time ago. But what was, when you visited him in his home and you spoke with him, and I spent a decent amount of time with him, you realized this house that he lived in was the only house him and his wife ever owned. It's where they raised all their kids. He did all the work on it. He took care of it. And they forcibly extracted him from his house when he was in the rehab facility. And a lot of this was from Jesse Wilson. Was his hope was to get back to that house, right? To get back to what he never gave up. It's victim to victim.
The house represented family
All of it.
connectedness, all of that.
And we had the pictures from the house of the work that he did on it. And we started the opening statement where the house was cold and dark and empty, and there hadn't been a Christmas there in a year, and there hadn't been a Thanksgiving. And we kind of worked it through there. And then we had his daughter-in-law was our only before and after. Usually I have a lot more before and after damage witnesses, but she did such a solid job that I didn't think we needed any more, to where she spoke to his health and his vitality and what he did to get back to where he was. And then the faith portion, he was on his way to Sunday Mass, and when he got hit, which was a great fact, I have to admit. But he was a minute away from the church, and Mass didn't start till 7:30 in the morning. The crash was at 7:09. And one of the things that I felt was most powerful was, I said to him, Don, why are you going there 20 minutes early? He says, I grew up Catholic, serving masses, 7:30 a.m. Mass on a Sunday. No one's there, right? No one's there early. And what I found out was, and it's an emotional thing to talk about, those 20 minutes that he would go there, he would think about his wife, and he would spend time in the quiet of the church with his wife. And so the story became about what they took from him was time with his wife, even though she wasn't there. And
Love
that
it.
his character and integrity came through that. And then in the community portion, which I'm all just putting this together now, he was a woodworker. And we had a picture of him that I took a week before the trial where he had refurbished a really small metal wooden bench from one of his friends' gardens who had lost her husband. And when I showed him that picture, I said, what's important about that? He couldn't speak in the trial.
Yeah.
Started crying.
Yeah.
In the closing, I thought about it over lunch. I had that picture and I thought, you know what? My God, family's here, health is here, faith is here, work is here, character, integrity, community. And we held that picture up and said, folks, all the things that we talked about in jury selection are all right here in Don's life in this picture. That's
Yeah,
what,
perfect.
And that's why he got so emotional. I didn't catch it then, but we've caught it now. It's because his entire life about who he is right here. And he fought to get it back. And like you said, Joe, if that's not worth a lot, you can say so. But
yeah, I love that because that's the other piece of this, just for the completion of the process for people who are thinking about it is think of that two worlds closing. Think of what you're doing is you're affirmatively picking something that has universality to it. And then what you're pointing out through the case is that by virtue of how this case is being defended, they're trying to say that that's not valuable. And we cannot accept that. That's why we're here. We cannot accept that to be true. And we know we don't get to be the decider of that. But by definition, if we didn't cause you to have to come here and leave your homes and your offices and your vacations and your whatever else you had to leave to come here, then by default, what they say is what happens. They're the controllers of the purse strings of the case, but not today. Today you are, and you get to say this, you get to pronounce this. And then one of the techniques that I use, or one of the things that I say, is, what you decide is going to forever live in this courthouse. You're going to sign this verdict form, and it's going to get filed into this court as an official document, and it's going to live here. And 10 years from now, when you're with your grandchildren, you get to say to your grandchildren, I was on the jury that got to decide for our community what this means. And if you want to know that for sure, you can go down the courtroom, you can go down the courthouse today, and you can go to the clerk's office and you can say, pull up the verdict form from that case. And that's the case I was on. It'll forever live here. And so it's an empowerment thing, but it's a community empowerment thing. It's like if you gotta spend your time serving on a jury, do you want it to be a garbage case that doesn't mean anything, or do you want to be the people on the case that mattered for our community? How many times in life do you get to be important?
Well, and that's raising to like a level of awe, right? This is a big deal and it's important. And what you said there before is when we get up there and say, they say it's not worth very much, and we say it's worth a hell of a lot. The problem is they can't help but get up there and then give their number. And then the jurors go, oh, 125 grand and 30% fault. I mean, I thought we were talking in the millions here. And it kind of polarizes the case even further, but you really have put the defense in a situation where they're either going to have to concede those things are very big, but not in this case, right? In our case, he kept arguing unfortunate accident, unfortunate injuries, fortunate recovery. That was his theme all the way through. Which we were able to take apart because the fortunate recovery was because of the determination and will of the 81-year-old man, not of anybody else. But when they get up and you have just given the jurors a binary choice of, we think it's worth these are the most important things. This is what you told us. This is the voice of this community. They think it's worth less. And then they get up and you have that instant or reaffirmed credibility where they say, well, it isn't worth very much. It's worth 125 grand. The jurors now are like, exactly, this is why we're here. And
right. They prove it up. The defense proves your point for you.
And but this was an important thing for me in this case, because what I found with this values-based voir dire and case building was I was very, very worried in this case. And we hear this, and I, at least in my 15 years doing this, I've always heard Gotta have a villain. You gotta have a villain. You gotta have a villain. And there's not one in this case. The defense lawyer is a great guy. The defendant was a phenomenal guy. He's the groundskeeper at my son's baseball fields. Like, he's a great guy. He's a retired teacher. He was working out early in the morning. He just didn't pay attention. Like, he just blew through the light. And so this values-based thing took the villain searching away. And it becomes less, look what they have done, look what they forced us to do, to more of, this is what we value. And this is a statement of what we value. And this is how it affected my client's life. Which I
love that. I love that because I've had that same struggle, by the way, with the idea, I mean, as I've gotten older and I've had some spiritual things happen in my life, I know why we sometimes create the villain or focus on what we consider to be a villain story and a betrayal story and all those kinds of things. And we could invent that into this case. But I'm with you. I mean, I think that I think it's overplayed, and I get it. I'm not trying to be holier than anything in this whole thing, but I don't think you always have to have a villain. And I've spent weeks and months of my life trying to create a villain in cases where it didn't feel natural to have a villain. I mean, even in these trucking cases where the truck driver is responsible, did all kinds of terrible things and caused something terrible to happen. I'm finding in my life that I'm very in tune in my life these days with the idea of I am a product of grace, and I'm very in tune with the idea that we can and in our best selves do extend grace and should extend grace. And so try being a plaintiff's lawyer with that mindset, and it becomes interesting.
Well, it becomes very powerful, though. You know what I mean? Is that if you're exemplifying that in the courtroom and listening to the way that you speak and the way that you live, people recognize that, and they can, more importantly, they can feel that. And if, to me, I want to live that way, right? That would be the more wholesome way to live, of like, hey, nobody's a bad person, right? And maybe there are some bad people out there, but in this case, there are not. I'd like to believe in the best of everybody, right? Because that's what we're trying to exemplify with the selection, is everybody believes these good things about each other and themselves. So
Right.
that's no different for the defendant or the defense lawyer.
They're just misinformed. I mean, in my world, they're just misinformed about the value of this very, very important thing. And they have to take the position that they're taking because they don't want to have to pay what otherwise they'd have to pay. So it kind of makes sense why they're there, but we're going to give you an opportunity to enlighten them. And it is an expression of grace if you do it this way. And still, it's a big verdict.
Well, and you can empathize with them. And Kenny, I don't mean to cut you, but you can empathize and say, listen, I could potentially see myself taking that position if I caused this much harm, right? It's hard to face that. It's hard to say, oh my God, I didn't know I did all this to Don's life. I had no clue that him being taken care of by his children was so, such a stealing of dignity that he had earned his whole life. I mean, he'd taken care of himself forever. This was catastrophic to him. And to his psyche. So, Kenny,
That's right.
No, Chris, I was thinking about two things. I mean, first is when you were describing the defendant, something tells me that the defendant, in his heart of hearts, is looking at the values that have been described, the assets and the core pieces of someone's life, and is probably thinking, yeah, that's worth.
Kenny, they brought him up in his direct examination of the defendant's case. They started asking him about his wife and his travels and all these things. Clearly not relevant to anything in this case, but I'm not going to be the guy. There were no objections, and I wasn't going to be the first one to object. But if you approach it from these ways that Joe has said, it's almost like that Gary Johnson in judo law, right? This defendant starts talking about all the great things in his life that he enjoys. They did it to try and humanize him. Well, the easy cross-examination is, well, Chuck, you really value that time with your wife, right? And your travels. And family's really important to you, isn't it? And obviously so is working out, your health. You work out. You were working out this day. You're clearly fit and in shape. What if somebody changed all of that? What if somebody took your ability to go work out whenever you wanted? And now the defense, knowing they had opened the door, they couldn't even object. They just sat there. And he kind of fumbled and stumbled. His responses didn't even matter. The jurors, I was looking at the jurors when I asked these questions. Their heads were going, back. They were totally zoned in as to what was going on, and they got it. You didn't even have to explain it. They got what was going on.
Sometimes you can walk back over to your chart that I try to leave living in the courtroom about the things that are important in life. And you point up, say, so if you'd have been on the jury, you would have agreed with all of them. These are among the most important and valuable things in life. Yes. So it informs each part. Like it informs, like even, so now you're going to go and you're going to get into this contentious argument with some defense IME.
Yeah.
What if you come to the IME and you say, so what if the first question to the IME is, the beginning of this case, we talked to all the jurors about the things that are most important in their life. And I'm curious, do you agree that family is among the most important things? Do you agree that self-determination is? Do you agree that the sense of independence is? So doctor, let's talk about how this affects, so you just change the narrative. The whole narrative of the case no longer becomes this thing that we're going to be adversarial about X upon. We're now going to focus on how right we all are about the valuation of, so the doctor, no doctor comes in there expecting that you're going to talk to them about, so let's talk about how this affects family. Wait a minute, that's not what we talk about. When you go to the doctor's office, that's not typically what you're talking about, right? So when you shift the narrative, I mean, what's a doctor going to do? If a doctor comes in there and tries to say it doesn't affect family, I mean, that guy's going to get rejected faster than hell too.
Well, and they're going to punt. They're going to say, well, I didn't ask, the plaintiff didn't say anything about that. I didn't ask him about that. And then it further polarizes, they don't care, right? They hired this person who doesn't care about those things. This is a medical thing. But the question I wanted to ask you, Joe, for, some of the time we have left, how are you maintaining that mindset in the day-to-day of all the cases, right? Because like everybody, you have tons of cases coming in, you have to make decisions on them. How are you saying, listen, this case, I know that's catastrophic harm, I know that's egregious liability. How are you keeping forefront in your mind? No, let's value base it. Let's make it on the values of what these things are about, and let's build the case around that. How are you not getting sucked back in?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, don't make the assumption I'm not getting sucked back in. I'm getting sucked back in. And so this is a work in progress, but I will tell you, like everything else in life, the more you do, it's like a muscle, the better developed it becomes. So now, I'm constantly looking for, I'm constantly naturally building. The first time I ever had this conception of doing this, I went to a venue and I did a focus group, and all I asked the focus group about is, what's upsetting you in your town right now? What are you guys bothered by here? I never talked about the case at all. And I got a list of things that if they were like, my questions to jurors were like, Mr. Berger, if you were prince of this town, king of the town for the day, and you could make a change, what would it be? And I just wanted to understand what was bothering people. And then I kind of reverse engineered my case. I said, and by the way, what came out of that was, we're just tired of the way people are treating each other. Like, if we could change one thing in our town, we'd start treating each other better again. Like, there was a time we treated each other better. And that came out in a lot of different ways, but that's what the universal thing that ended up coming out. So I remember, what I did with my case was a truck wreck case. It was a left turn truck wreck case. So the case became about, this is a left turn truck wreck case, but you know what it's really about? Aren't we tired of how people are treating each other? I mean, that's what this case is about. It's so the conception first became, how can I make this about the jurors? Which, Chris, Kenny, we've all heard forever. I mean, the case is about the jurors at some level. I mean, how can we make the jurors care? I mean, I preach that every time I'm talking. I try to preach. Don't forget, at the end of the day, we're so focused on the client, and we still have to remember, at the end of the day, this case is about the jurors. I mean, the jurors are the only ones who can make a difference in the case. It's got to be about the jurors, and the client is only part of the. It's only a conduit to get to the jurors. I mean, so the story of the case has to be a story that somehow they care enough about to actually pay attention and then want to do something about at the end. That's why when you can make it about the oath, when you can make about these things, making it about them is the key here. The key, the big point, and I'm harping on it and putting big exclamation points on it, is at every point, it's a great exercise to say, how is this about the jurors? So when the IME mistreats your client, how is this about the jurors? Because they may someday be in that situation, because their loved one may be in that situation, because it's not really about the client. Because I just don't think people are all that altruistic. I don't think people care that much about each other. They care about themselves. They're selfish. The human animal is the most selfish animal in the world that's ever been. We're the most self-centered. We are the center of our universe. Each one of us, as we walk through the universe, it's my freaking universe, and you happen to be a visitor in my universe. And so if that's true, then the case has to be about them. And so all the things we're talking about is, how can we make this about each of them? And so if we're going to make it about each of them, and notice I'm saying each of them because it's not a homogeneous group. We've been talking about all the ways they differentiate each other. Look at a jury, and the first thing you'll say to yourself as a human being in today's era is, how many Black people, how many white people, how many Asian people, how many Hispanic people, how many men, how many women? Oh, that person looks gay, that person looks this, that person looks that, and we're differentiating. And historically, that's what jury selection has been about. Let's see how we're all different. Let's see how we're all different. Let's see where the biases are. The biases cause differentials. What we're suggesting here, Chris, is actually radical. It's looking at jury selection saying, let's stop caring about what makes us all different. Let's stop caring about if somebody has a propensity toward this thought or a bias that's about this or whatever. Let's see if in the world of all the biases that exist, is there something, can we use this short time that we have together in jury selection to find something that everybody, regardless of what these differentials are, will all come together on? If I have that, I don't have to exclude anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to exclude anybody. You know, I know people are going to watch this and say, Joe, you are deluding yourself. If somebody is a Trump or this or a this or that, or they think that they're not going to award money for pain and suffering, they have a philosophical problem around it, that's going to cause them. I'm living proof that may not be as true, as universally true as people have historically believed it to be.
I would agree with you. We had
the best money I can from, I've gotten the best money from people who you would have stricken the crap out of that juror as soon as you'd got an opportunity to.
Well, we had no cause strikes at all. And we only, in Missouri, we get 3 peremptory strikes. And we only used 2, just because one guy was he was actually a good juror. He just was, I didn't think he fit with the team, and that was it. But it wasn't
but notice why you struck him. Not because he's bad, but because he didn't fit with the team. This is all about creating a team. That's what people forget. They forget that we're pulling these people together. We're choreographing something to reach this very specific result. We're employing these people to do a very specific job, and we get to decide. It's the best thing about being a plaintiff's lawyer. We get to decide what the damn case is about. And we waste that by saying it's about a left turn. Mm-hmm. We waste that by saying it's about a negligent training exercise. We got to make it about, do people really give a crap about that? Or do they care about somebody saying that my independence isn't valuable? Shit, man, that's my freaking independence. that we're talking about, because we all have it, right? So that's the part that's radical about this, is to stop looking for the differentiators, start to look to the things that are universally true and universally part of every human being. And the deeper that you can get to that, I think the better. The deeper that you can tap into something that is just freaking universally there, the most powerful it is, because nobody can take that apart. They just can't do it. And you can hide in plain sight, and the case becomes about that. It's so fun. This kind of jury selection, Kenny, I can't wait till you do one of these. It's so fun. I don't know, Kenny, do you get stressed over jury selection?
So in South Carolina, there's very little
I
stress.
don't get it. Right. But
Here's the deal. I mean, for Joe, Chris and I've had this conversation many times, and for the folks who are listening, many of whom are in South Carolina, attorney participation, attorney-led voir dire is not prohibited in South Carolina. It's just that it is a matter of, it's at the judge's discretion, and as a matter of custom and tradition, the degree of attorney participation has been limited. But what I've tried to do, what I know a number of other attorneys throughout the state have tried to do, is work to develop these skills, work to develop the knowledge base, be prepared, continue to make the motions for greater attorney participation in voir dire, such that even if it's 30 minutes per side or even 30 minutes total, that you're bringing to the forefront these exact values that y'all are discussing.
And that's what we did, Kenny, was 30 minutes. This was a 30-minute jury selection because it was towards the end of the day. And we just cut away the extraneous stuff, and we were done in 30 minutes.
First time I did it, that was a 30. I traded. First time I did this, I traded time. I traded all the way down to 30 minutes to be able to do it my way. And this is where I spent my time. So here's something I'll say to those lawyers who you just spoke to, who say, well, this is all good and fine, but I can't do it in South Carolina. No. Here's the beauty of this. Go do some focus, prove to yourself that we're right by going and doing some focus groups and just asking them, what are the most valuable things? What are they? I guarantee you're going to get the same list that Chris got in his case. You're going to get family. You're going to get independence. You're going to get freedom. You're going to get self-determination, some value, remember he said pickup truck. That was from a joke that I made, but wasn't a joke. It was a real case where when I said that to somebody, it was actually in Wisconsin. He said, most valuable thing, my pickup truck. And everybody laughed. And I said, well, hold on, sir. I don't think that's a joke. He goes, not a joke. It's my pickup truck. I said, yeah, but what's it about your pickup truck that makes it the most valuable thing? I can get in that damn thing. I can crank the thing. But yeah, sounds like independence. Yeah, independence. And it sounds like freedom, because there's not a boulder big enough to stop you from getting somewhere in your pickup truck. He goes, damn right. I'll climb that damn boulder if I need to climb it. I'm like, that case, by the way, taught me that I was under the mistaken belief that because I lived in the Southeast, rednecks lived in the Southeast. There's rednecks everywhere. Okay, pickup trucks are pickup trucks. But the idea of that, so going back to the point that I was trying to make, for those people who don't get to do voir dire, this is even more important. You should be building your cases around value propositions that are universal and that are deeply human. These things that we're talking about, because you can know right now without any voir dire that those things at the end of the case, you can get up at the beginning of the case, say the case about these things, and it's about the value of these things. And you can rest assured that those things are going to resonate with, because they are deeply universally true.
Well, Joan, the one case that Chris and I had in South Carolina, I mean, I couldn't tell you what the medical expenses were. We didn't pursue lost earning capacity. I couldn't tell you any of that stuff. I do remember one of the defense experts lived in a former Playboy mansion, but other than that, the case was about our guy, and this beautiful life so beautiful that one of his preschool teachers knew that he was such a remarkable young man that she followed him throughout his life and into his musical career. And in that case, the defense argument was he has made a remarkable recovery. Well, Chris and I spent a bunch of time with his mom, and his mom happened to have a shirt with this little boy Ryan. I mean, he got older, but when he was a little boy, it just said remarkable, you know. And so we started looking at all the things that were remarkable about Ryan, and then we looked at all the ways in which, you know, he just had a remarkable amount of harm done in his life, remarkable amount of talent and ability and hope that was taken from him. I mean, just clear, you know, building in really clear contrast between the before and after picture. But it's, you know, it's, and this is one of the things I wanted to mention earlier, you know, the reason Chris and I were able to learn and tell the human story and put the value where it needed to be, and emphasize the points of the case that were most prominent, is because we believed it. And so one of the things, as I've been sitting here listening to y'all talk, one of the reasons, Joe, that your approach is so powerful, and then Chris, that your approach and version of it was so powerful, is because that's how y'all live anyways. Like, you didn't say, all right, for this week or for these 24 hours, I'm going to decide these are the things that are important to me. Like, all day long as we go throughout life, you know, I know for me, one of my biggest challenges right now is, you know, how do I make sure that I'm doing a great job for clients, but also being a great dad, you know, to a 2-year-old, and a great husband to my wife. And if any part of that life is damaged, whenever any part of it feels out of kilter, that I feel like I'm not up to the standard of where I need to be as, you know, lawyer and servant and husband and father, you know, it hurts. And if somebody else's actions damage my life in any one of those areas, I mean, the number is, you know, off the charts.
And that's what you talk about, Kenny, is when Joe says this, Keith Mitnick says this, a lot of people say, you know, golden rule yourself. And so for me, a lot of the things that I try to do to take care of myself is to be able to engage with my sons in an active way. And if my boys, if I could not, and it sounds hokey because everybody has it, but if I could not play catch with them, right? Last night I played catch with my one son, just 20, 25 throws, just to get out there. If someone damaged me to where I couldn't do that, and I was resorted to being on the sidelines, I mean, we're talking about a catastrophic personal experience that I find to be invaluable. And that is, but it's not like you said, we didn't just have that experience for 1 week, right? I'm trying to develop that over my life so then it's easier to connect, because the next trial coming up is about mothers and daughters. And those relationships, and how this injury in this case has totally altered what that mother had hoped her relationships would be, and the work she's done to make it as good as she can, and whether that's important or not. But you have to feel it in your own life. And Joe, before we go, I did want to say the service that you provide by putting all of this stuff out there for free, I think, and Kenny, you do the same. For me, I am the most selfish taker of free legal podcasts in the United States. I must have listened to, you know, I'm using Joe's language because I've listened to them dozens of times, right? They are what I listen to because it resonates with me. And I just want to tell you, speaking on behalf of probably an enormous silent majority, thank you very much for sharing it and just putting it out here, because for what you guys do, I'm able to take it for free and make it my own and put it in practice to where it has made demonstrable, significant improvements in the quality of my life and my family's life. So I just want to say, I've never had the opportunity to say that. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome, Chris. And you know, it's we're all stepping on the shoulders of other people, right? And I'm pretty certain I've never had a truly unique individual thought. It's all because somebody tweaked me in some direction. I learned something, and maybe I've some synapses have come together. Yeah, I credit dyslexia for that, you know, which, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. I appreciate the kind words. And Kenny, you've been doing great putting these things out. And of course you do so much for the bar and for for lawyers who are trying to come up and learn this stuff. I mean, it's fun. It's a huge part of my life. I mean, I'm speaking now about 100 times a year, between podcasts and going to events. And people say, why do you do that? And my answer at first is it feeds my ego. It makes me feel good. But second, I feel like this is what I'm really supposed to be doing now. You know, there's the beginning of my career was trying to become like, now I finally feel like I kind of have this a little bit, you know, like I'm still learning all the time. And now I feel like, man, if I can just help one other person, you know, then that person's going to help another person. And then we change, we affect much greater change that way. Chris, before we go, I want one more thing on your case though. What was your ask and how did you ask for it? Because people are always interested and people always struggle with, once you have the things that are most valuable, but now how do you take that and make the jump to, by the very nature of what we're talking about, is non-economic. So how do you take these very important things and now try to translate those into dollars and cents? And I'm curious how you did it, if you don't mind sharing that.
No, I will. And so the ask was 5 million. And how did I get to that number? Looking back on it, I probably limited what I thought Don was worth, what had happened to him. And this has happened a couple times. I spoke, Joe, you had me speak one time at ATAA on a $10 million verdict we had. And you asked me on the stage, how did I get to that number? And he said, well, that's the number. And in that case, I had asked for 10 and not based on any economics. Same here, asked for 5, not based on any economics. And, you know, that case, they came back at 10. I thought, my God, I should ask for 15. I cut my client short, right? He deserved more. And here I asked for 5 because I was in between numbers, and this is just a process that happens, and I'm sure it happens for everybody else. Over the month or two leading up to trial, the number almost finds you, right? It'll resonate with you. In fact, in this last case last week that we were picking the jury on, my client asked me what I felt the number was. And she felt it was a certain number, and I felt, I don't know, I'm at like 7 million. You know, I feel 7 million is where I'm at right now. And I don't know if I'll get to 10, and maybe I'll get down to 5, depending on what happens during the case. And it's just a feeling that comes to, but the universal thing about it that every time is it has to be like a gut chest feeling of right.
What Kenny was saying before is
Yes.
that you gotta live it, and it's gotta. I agree with that. By the way, I agree that, you know, if you're faking it and you're throwing it out there, this is the way I think about it. The words that come out say one thing, and all of the energy that is your humanity is saying something else, and that never works well. I mean, that's suddenly everything that's credible about you gets thrown out the window. So you have to believe the number. And the techniques that you brought it up, you know, one of the ways to work on that is to voir dire yourself and ask yourself, if this happened to me or the person most close to me in my life, the person I love the most, what would it be worth then? And then why should it be worth less for somebody else? Becomes an easy leap. But there is a disconnect, and it's worth just leaving folks with that idea that we still, while this is, in my opinion, the best way to get to what is most valuable, you still have to do the work to get yourself to the number that represents. And it's okay to struggle with that. If you, in fact, I'd be more worried about you if you didn't. And I love the way Chris said it. The number will find you. Ruminate, marinate in it, and just let it flow to the surface. And notice what I'm not saying is, please don't get on the listserv and say to somebody who has no idea about your case, what's this case worth? That's, I don't think, the best way. The best way is to go inside, find that universal place for you, and then start to just play with it. And at the end of the day, my belief is this, and I think Chris would agree with this, and Kenny too, that once you find it, when it's real for you, you'll know that's the right number. And then not unapologetically share that. share it as early in your case as you're permitted to, burst the bubble early, and just look people in the eye and know that you are a credible human being, and what you say is more important than your explanation for why. I'm a big proponent these days of, if the number's 5 million, the number's 5 million, and I don't need to give you 3 explanations for why that's true. I've lived credibly in this courtroom. I've become your leader. I've pulled this group together. We've formed over the things that we've jointly agreed are the most important things. I've formed myself into the group. I've formed myself as a leader in the group, worthy of your respect, worthy of your credibility or credibility. Now I get to tell you that this is the number. And, just don't just recognize that you're stuck in you are in a paradigm. And like Chris said, he was his own limiter, and that's the truth. You are the limiter by definition. You are the first limiter. And so anyway, I'm rambling. Kenny, I appreciate it. Chris, I'm so proud of you, and not, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your number in this case, but I'm much more proud of just the way you're going about this thing. To being, I think we share one thing, and I know Kenny is in this with us. We're lifelong learners. The longer we do this, the more we're going to continue. It's like you don't stop listening to podcasts and listening to other people who you respect and all that kind of stuff, because it always feels like there's more to learn. And I still think there's another plane to reach in being a trial lawyer, and I think that we've all said this in our own way. Part of that is it's the same path to being the best human being in all the roles that we play. Like, the best lawyer is the one who struggles to be the best in these various roles that is this thing called life. And then you bring that into the courtroom. How can people not be attracted to that and want to be a part of that team, right? Who are the people who you want to gravitate toward, who you find to be attractive? And I don't mean that physically, although that can be part of it, but you know what I'm saying. Well, who are the people whose team you want to be on, and you want them to know they're on your team? That's what you want. I mean, like, that's the model for me of being a trial lawyer, so, and it includes what Kenny mentioned, which is really having a heart of servant leadership in the various roles that we play. Yeah. So with that, Chris, phenomenal job. Congratulations again to you.
Thank you.
The team of people who helped you, which I'm sure there are people who did. We none of us do this on our own. And Kenny, thanks for having us. And secretly in the background, there's this young guy named William Newton who has been hanging out and listening. And I can't wait to see what your career is going to bring, young Mr. Newton. So soon to be a lawyer, and then on to great things. So.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for the time. And Joe, I share Chris's appreciation. And like I got taught a long time ago, when I was thanking somebody and asking what I could do, they just said, pass it on to the next guy.
Pay it forward. That's the best thing you can do.
All right, folks, you've been listening to Best Practices with Kenny Berger. Our guests today have been Chris Finney and Joe Freed, with a little cameo from William Newton, our law clerk. Thank y'all so much for listening, and we'll do it again soon. Gentlemen, thank y'all.
Appreciate it.